Hello, and welcome to the Family Histories Podcast, the show for and about those of us who are sat quietly in libraries, archives, and spare rooms all around the world, tirelessly piecing together our collective social and family history. My name is Andrew Martin. I'm a family historian, and I'll be your host. In this episode, The Baptist, we'll be hearing about a woman who travelled the country in the early 19th century, baptising her children hundreds of times. And then we'll be looking for clues to her origins and fate amongst a plethora of pseudonyms. So, put down that old parish map, grab a cuppa, and let's meet our guest. My guest is a family historian whose research snowballed from a personal quest of researching their Romany roots to a heritage project and online resource, finding, tracking and documenting Romany gypsy families in the UK and USA. So, before he gets bored of my waffling and goes back to his research, I should probably introduce my guest. It's Gary Stanley. Hello, Gary. Welcome to the Family Histories Podcast.
Hi there. Thank you for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure. Now, we always start our episodes with basically the same question, which is, how did you get interested in researching your family history?
Basically, I've always grown up knowing of my Romany roots. My grandfather was always very proud of his roots, although the wider community not quite so proud and didn't treat him quite so well. But he always instilled the kind of family values that go with the Romany community in my father, and my father kind of passed it down to me. I never really had an interest in the history growing up, so to speak, but I think as I've become older, it's become more interesting to me. I think perhaps this happens over time with most people.
Yeah, perhaps, yeah. So where did you start with your research? What did you have to hand that you could get going with?
Well, basically, it just started out of looking at grandparents and going from there, basically, because there were quite a few interesting stories that I'd heard about my great-grandfather growing up. He used to be involved in boxing and various other things, and I just wanted to kind of learn more about certain members of the family, and it grew from that into what effectively snowballed into something else.
Wow. So did you have lots of photographs and family documents that you were able to look at?
Not quite so many photographs, because it's something that doesn't exist a lot, especially within my family and in many Romany families, because when a member of the family would pass away, lots of their belongings would tend to be burned along with them.
Right, okay.
It was seen as stopping their kind of soul passing on to the next life, especially in my family. So if you kept photos, it kind of kept them here. So if you got rid of them, it allowed them to move on, so to speak.
Ah, I see.
So I do have some, but not a lot.
Yeah. I mean, that's maybe in some way a bit of a challenge in doing the research, because I know that for my family, I have lots of photographs to choose from. And sometimes there are people in them that I think, I don't know who you are, but then I might get another batch of photographs that has a name and I can just match them up. And it's very useful for family history. So are there any other kind of challenges that you face when you're researching your family?
I guess in regards to looking at records and trying to find people and where they perhaps lived or grew up, it's different from, I don't like using the word the normal community, but sure. In regards to that, you might find that either in the 1800s or further back, they would live in a certain village or a certain town. So you'd be able to focus your research on a certain area.
Okay.
When you're looking at Romany families, it's kind of different, because although they did have kind of travelling routes and areas that they were local to, you could find them halfway across the country or somewhere else. And it's not always easy to find them in records going back further in time.
Is there a purposeful kind of exclusion from the records, from maybe the record keeper's point of view, or are there some records that are maybe not kind of civil records that do document the movements of a more kind of nomadic family?
Surprisingly, there are two kind of good ways of finding them. A lot of parents of Romanese would baptise their children, even if they weren't religious, because if you go back to I think it's the 1700s onwards, you would have parishes were responsible for the poor in their certain areas.
Yeah.
So if a family wanted help or assistance, it would tend to be that they would want to find out where that person was born and move them back to the area so that the specific parish they were born was the person paying for them. Yeah. So the reason that Romany families would baptise almost all of their children in most cases would be that they had sort of a place of residence. And it also helped when certain parishes or certain areas wanted to perhaps get rid of the unwanted people in their kind of areas. They would find out where they were based and try and ship them back to the area. So if you had a family with perhaps 5 or 6 children and they baptised their children in 5 or 6 different villages or places, they could choose perhaps the nearest place they would be forcibly shipped back to. So baptism records are a good place to find names of people, parents.
Okay.
And the other place that's really useful to find Romany and traveller families is actually newspaper articles. Sadly, it's mostly because it's negative in regards to, it might be police records or things that have recorded.
Yeah.
But you'll tend to find a lot of the families in newspaper articles as well.
Now, I've heard of terms like Roma, Romany, Gypsy and traveller before, but are these groups of people distinctly different in the way that they can be researched? Are there any different behaviours that determines how you trace them?
I wouldn't say so, because Romany and travellers are both distinct ethnic groups recognised by law. So Romany tends to refer to, as you say, gypsies, although some of the community don't like the term because it's now deemed as racist. But the other half of the community don't mind if you call them gypsy. It depends on a person-by-person basis, basically.
Okay.
Traveller tends to refer to the Irish travelling community, but both groups tended to intermix and still do today to a certain degree. So you can find them in similar records, and I wouldn't say there's any distinct way of researching one or the other.
I see. So at what point did you decide in your research that you were going to collect any references and turn this into a heritage project? Because that's quite a big step and a big commitment.
It kind of grew uncontrollably because once you start, because literally all of the Romany and traveller families are mostly related.
Okay.
You tend up looking at families, and then you're looking at brothers and sisters, and then you're looking at parents, and it goes on and on and on and on. And you find that, or I found in my case, and many others do as well, that there are other people researching the same families, and there are a wide community of people doing this. So I thought, I came across many, many people doing the same work, and it's kind of like, this seems a little bit redundant that we're all trying to look for the same thing, wasting your time. It would be a good thing to gather it all in one place. Yeah. And if I happen to find records that you would find useful as well, they're there for you to look at and easier for you to find.
When I was looking at your site, I noticed that you were saying that you were going to collect from kind of 1500s through to the 1900s. Yes. What kind of range of information have you found? Have you managed to go right back to the 1500s?
It's more of a challenge going back to the 1500s. Again, it's mostly, you'll find whether it's criminal records or baptism records. But okay. You get to a certain point where you have to learn other things, like I found myself having to research Latin to know what half of the documents was saying in certain points. Oh. It gets complicated.
Okay. My Latin is appalling.
Yeah. Mine isn't that great.
So where could people perhaps explore this project and try and see if they have documents on there that relate to their relatives?
I have my own website, which is free for anyone to access and look at. There's nothing behind a paywall. It's romaheritage.co.uk. You can find a wide-ranging things from baptism, marriage, death records, census records are also another useful thing to look at, and newspaper articles, because we're supported by the British Newspaper Archive, who kind of saw our project as quite interesting. Yeah. As I say, it is quite a useful area that perhaps not many people think of when looking at family history.
So how do you share your research with your own closer family? Are they interested at all?
Some of them are, some of them aren't. I have 2 children myself, and they've just become teenagers, both of them. And I think it's a case of the older that you are, the more interested you are. The younger you are, not quite so much in some cases.
Yeah, I think I can remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. But in case of sharing it with them, anything I come across that I think might be interesting to them. Again, it's like you were talking about photographs earlier, because I don't have many. the thing that's interesting to me is they were a subject that was photographed quite often. So I will come across photographs in areas I know that they either lived or travelled for certain periods of time. And you will come across these picturesque photos of Romany caravans and tents and things with people in these areas. And you're thinking, they are probably my family, but I don't know if they are. And it's a little sad, to be honest.
Yeah, tantalizing to think you might be staring at them,
yes,
but you have no way of knowing.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's agony.
Yes, it is.
So have you ever used DNA testing in your research? Because you say that the community is perhaps quite close, so maybe you would find them all connected in some way?
DNA is a big kind of part of this as well. I've done my own DNA test, and I was part of a research project that was carried out by the University of Leicestershire, I think it was.
Okay.
It was Professor Churi King, who also did the Richard III grave and did that.
Yes, yeah.
So, yeah, she did a little study on it along with another guy, I think he was called Matt Sears. It was to prove whether or not the different families that are known within the community shared similar DNA, which we do, but also to kind of discover the roots and where they actually came from, which point to India, and they do point to India. They share a massive part of it. So it's an interesting side of it as well.
Yeah, fascinating. And congratulations on having the royal DNA tester working with you. So,
yes.
Do you think that there's anything that the genealogy community or maybe industry could do to make itself a better place?
In regards to what aspect?
In the way that you research or the way that things are available to be researched?
I think that aspect of things has changed over the years, because if you go back even 10, 20 years, you had to go physically along to record offices if you wanted to find certain things, whereas the internet has transformed that, because many record offices or people share the information they have online. So you can physically sit at a computer or even on your phone, and you can find things that perhaps 10 years ago you wouldn't be able to. And from my point of view, that's helped a lot, because, as I say, if you're looking for Romany in areas you don't know where they could be, you can't go along to a specific office hoping to find them in like Devon when they might be in London or Norfolk or somewhere else. So it was literally like looking for a needle in a haystack. So the internet has helped a big way in that.
Yeah. And do you have a favourite type of record to use in your research?
I think for me, the most useful way of finding them has been baptism records, but I do find the newspaper articles interesting because you can find some colourful descriptions in there. Very colourful.
You might be just one record away from uncovering a fascinating life story in your family tree, and you never quite know where, when, or with whom it might turn up. With this in mind, it's time for my guest to pick one of their most fascinating relatives and then tell their life story. So, Gary, who are you going to introduce us to?
I'd like to give you a name, but it's very hard to give you a name. And it's difficult to explain, but I'll try and explain it to you.
Okay.
Part of the wider research I've done regarding Romanian travellers, because we're all very closely knit and you find we're all related to one another, one of the people I came across while doing my research quite early on, and who I've kind of taken quite fondly to in an odd way, I'd like to call her Elizabeth Nichols, but that probably wasn't her name.
Right, okay.
And the reason I've picked her is because during the 1800s, the 1830s specifically, I came across her baptising a child or perhaps two children at least over 600 times across the whole span of England.
I really don't know how. I mean, that's a lot of effort to get a child or even just two children baptised.
A lot of effort.
Even if they're being baptised, if this is someone who's moving around, that's an awful lot of moving around during a decade even. So I'm somewhat confused as to how this could have happened. So what else did you find out?
Well, basically, it stems from a record that was actually I found in the town where I live, because it mentioned the baptism of a child to and Elizabeth Nichols, and the father, I think, was called Antonio. He was also called Antonio Nichols, but he was mentioned as being a sailor in the Portuguese Navy. Because the town where I live is nowhere near the sea, and it just seemed to be a little bit of an odd place to find this family. So I spent a little time looking into them, and I found locally again over the next couple of days and the days prior, they had been travelling through certain villages and towns, and along the route, they had kept baptising the same child in several places.
Okay.
It grew from this into being 2 or 3 in local villages locally to I would find them every couple of days or every week, literally for the space of 10 years around the whole country.
Wow. Did they ever baptise what appears to be the same child in the same place?
They appeared to baptise the same child in the same place, but they would do it by a different name because I found them under various alias names, probably to either evade the law or to evade being kind of spotted in particular areas, because they had various surnames such as Nichols or Sanders or Edwards, Brian, Robinson, Jackson. And the only way, if you looked at it from afar, you would think they were separate records for different people.
Yeah.
But because of the way I had tracked, I found the Nichols surname and the parents specifically. Antonio at that time was kind of not a common name and not common to find someone being listed as a Portuguese sailor. So I knew that was the one family.
That was your unique bit to track, yeah.
Yeah, there would be gaps in the records between the weeks or the days where they seemed to go missing. But then looking at the different aspect, I began looking at like Portuguese sailors, and I came across them using these various other alias names, but still saying that with the same child name, but the different surname, or the parent's name slightly different. But I put these all on a map to build up a big map of kind of that it wasn't a coincidence that these names were linked. And you would find various records at the time as well, where perhaps in the baptism records they would write, I think this is this child which was baptised just across the border in this other village.
Ah, so people were starting to get suspicious.
Yes, there were various newspaper articles, especially in Kent, I think in the mid-1830s, where they had already established and put together that this lady was travelling doing this, and they listed some of the names that she had used. But by that point, they had moved on to different counties in England, so they obviously hadn't been caught up with.
What's the kind of extremity of where they travelled and had all these baptisms? Do they sort of start off in the southwest of England and then end up somewhere up north? Or how far do they reach with this wave of baptism?
So I live in the south, so I live around the Exeter area. So I found them here first. But yeah. I think the earliest records that I found them were in Hampshire. But they seem to travel all around the coast, which may or may not support the fact that he was a sailor, possibly.
Okay.
But they travelled, so you go from Hampshire to Dorset to Devon and Cornwall, and then they would travel up to Wales and all around the Welsh coast.
Wow.
Cumberland. They may have ventured up as far as Scotland, but Scottish records are a little bit harder to kind of go into and find. But I think they tended to stick to England.
Wow, this is amazing. I can remember a craze from a few years back, and maybe some of the listeners can too, which was Pokemon Go, where you had to go and catch them all. And this reminds me slightly of, as you were saying this, I was thinking of, Pokemon Go. Is that you've just got to go and get them all. And it's like a very early edition of that, but with child baptisms, which is a bit strange. But I would also love to see the ancestry hints on this person as well, because they must be crazy. There must be so many if someone's trying to build this tree with this person in it.
They're kind of an interesting family. I think the main reason they did it wasn't for any religious purpose at all. It was mostly at the time because the church would be the institution that was handing out either money or clothes.
Okay.
So they would go to each place to be given a handout of some description, and then that's probably how they made their living for that 10-year period.
Wow. I mean, that's genius, I think. Obviously they needed the money and then or the clothing or both to survive, but what a method to go through all of those. That's incredible. How far along did you kind of get before you were thinking, hang on a minute, is this the same person?
When I first looking at the Nichols surname, and then I established that they'd travelled quite far around the country, it just seemed very odd to me why they were doing it, and then to find them with these various alias surnames. But I knew they were the same people purely because of the unique father's name and the fact that it was always mentioned as being Portuguese, or that he'd always passed away in the previous 6 months.
Yeah.
Which I think was given as a specific reason because at the time, the law, it was an odd period in time because you had the old poor law and the new poor law, which I think changed in 1834, but it didn't take effect until a few years later. So that it basically meant that before the new poor law came in, you were given handouts. You could go along and say, I need help or I need assistance. But after a specific time in some of the counties, and then it spread wider, if you wanted assistance, you had to go into one of the workhouses. So I think after a certain period of time towards the end of the 1830s, what they were doing seemed to disappear, or I couldn't find them anymore. And it was probably to do with the fact that they were unable to get assistance this way anymore.
Yeah, so they would put themselves potentially in line to end up in the workhouse, I guess, if they continued to ask for this support. So, and I wonder whether they did end up going to the workhouse, or did they manage to find some other way to survive?
I'd love to know, because apart from this 10-year period of time where I found them, I don't know where they were before the period of time, and I don't know what happened to them after, although I suspect the father was transported to Australia, because I think he committed a murder that he was sent to Australia for.
I mean, that would certainly do it, but okay. So things obviously got tougher. Wow. So how is this person or people, by whatever name that they actually go by, how are they connected to you?
Well, I mentioned there is a family of Nichols in the central of the country. As I say, we're all mostly related going back in time. So whether or not they were from this specific family is unclear, and it's something perhaps I'll never find out, but hopefully I will. I don't know why, but I have this affinity with the family and the hardship that they probably went through, and just the amount of effort that they went to do what they did.
That is remarkable. I'm going to be looking out for the Nichols, or some names very similar to that. I don't knowingly have any Nichols ancestors. I have some Nicholas, but not Nichols. But I'll be looking out through the registers.
Well, they use that alias surname as well, so you might.
Oh, there we go. So I will be looking out for any slightly repetitive baptisms when I'm doing my research, and I will let you know if I find any. Well, thank you, Gary, for telling us the story about Elizabeth Nichols and her many baptisms of her child or children. But I think it's now time for you to face
the brick wall.
It can be so frustrating when you encounter one of those research brick walls. They stand tall, casting their shadow across our research paths, but all it can take is a fresh set of eyes or a different idea to bring them down. It's now time for my guest to tell us about one of their brick walls, in a hope that one of you, dear listeners, can help to solve it. Okay, Gary, what have you got for us?
Well, there are many brick walls I could probably choose from, because just from the sheer amount of research and the sheer number of brick walls in researching Romany families, but the specific relates to the previous Elizabeth Nichols.
Okay.
Because apart from that 10-year period in time, from the 1830 to 1840, I know nothing about her life prior to that point in time, and nothing about her life after about 1840.
Yeah, that's curious.
I would love to find out more.
Yeah, I think I would as well, just to know if she had any more baptisms lined up. Do you have any suspicions about her life beforehand?
I think she was originally probably called Elizabeth Stivery, which is, I think, is Stivery.
Okay.
Or it could have been Twivey, because in the records it's not quite clear, and some of them it's spelt both ways.
Sure.
Because one of the earliest records that I came across was actually in the National Archives, where the father had said something specific about her being sick, to try and gain money from the local parish. And I think this was in Hampshire. And it's a story they used or evolved after that point in time in regards to their newborn child or their children over the next 10 years. It was just a very similar story. So I don't know if they came from Hampshire, if they were based there, and what. It's just very difficult to tell where they were before that point of time.
So you think that she has this different name, and do you have any suspicions as to where she might have gone after this period of multiple baptisms?
No, because I think they had a couple that I found. I would be tending to find one every week at least up until 1840. But after 1840, there just seems to be nothing. So I don't know if perhaps she was arrested for what she was doing, or if they just stopped doing it, or perhaps she'd been transported under a different name. I really have no idea what happened to her.
And can you remember where you last saw her at the end of her baptism streak?
I think it was around the Cumbria area. It was around December time, and then that's it. No mention afterwards.
And was this before, because you alluded to that Antonio was sent over to Australia, or you think he was sent to Australia? Does he get sent to Australia after they've been in Cumbria?
Well, that seems to be in around 1836, because there was a record related to Wales. I can't remember which part of Wales, but he was moved to a hulk transport ship in London. And from there, it's not even clear that he was sent to Australia or if he just remained on the hulk ship.
Wow. Well, the hulk would have definitely have been pretty grim. So, gosh, this really is a research brick wall. And so the child that gets baptized multiple times, do you know what becomes of them?
No, again, I don't think it was the same child they baptized. I think they possibly had 2 or 3.
Okay.
Because going through, it might even be more than that, because going through that 10-year period of time, the child was always, he was given an indication in the baptism records that the child was a couple of years old. It tended to range between either it was newborn or perhaps up to the age of 5.
Okay.
So over the 10-year period, there could have been a few different children that they were doing this with.
Yeah, because there is a marked difference between a newborn and a 5-year-old. So yeah, definitely sounds like there's more than one child involved there. So, gosh, yeah, there's very little to hang on to with this one. So just to go back to those surnames, so Nichols, if they turn up under that name, how is that spelt?
Nichols. But the other variant of that is you could also find them as Nicholas or Nicholson.
Okay.
And there were many other names, because there was also Sanders or Sanderson, Edwards, Brian or O'Brien, Robinson, Jackson, and as I say, the original surname I think was probably Stivery or Twivey. Many things to look at, which is what makes it so hard.
They are, and I like how there are some groups of the surnames there.
Yes.
But then there are some which are wildly very different from all the rest.
They are.
So it's not that they were slightly choosing a different name. They were completely choosing a different name, which is a wonderful puzzle for family historians, but it also sounds a very difficult one as well. How long have you been trying to find them?
I think I originally came across them 2016, so it's probably at least 9 years now.
Wow. Well, let's see if a listener can help to at least nudge this along, even if they don't actually break your brick wall here. So what would be the best way for listeners to make contact with you if they think that they have a clue or a research idea?
They can either contact me through the website again, which is romaheritage.co.uk, or regarding this specific family and the project that relates to them, there's a website called theserialbaptist.co.uk, which I've recorded as much information about them, all the different surnames, and I've even mapped all the locations of where the baptisms are and drawn the routes that they probably travelled in the various years.
Wow. Yeah, you definitely have been researching this. So.
Yeah, it's sort of become a little bit of a minor obsession.
Well, welcome to family history, basically.
Yes, many rabbit holes.
Of course, listeners can also head over to familyhistoriespodcast.com, where they can read this episode's show notes, and they can send us a message, or you can just email us at hello@familyhistoriespodcast.com, and we'll pass the message along. Now, hopefully this will be light work for our listeners to break this brick wall down, but I suspect it's going to be quite complicated. So in the meantime, I might just be able to help you with this, but you'll need to follow me through to the garage.
Okay.
Here we are.
Wow, what's all this?
This, Gary, is my secret time machine.
Really?
Yes. It's a fully operational, highly calibrated piece of scientific equipment.
Is this bit meant to be laying on the floor?
What's... Oh, it's a number 6. Must be from the time resonator. Now, let me just click that back on here. There. Good as new. Oh, I'm sure it'll be fine. Anyway, I thought that you might like a little trip back in time so that you can try to solve that brick wall for yourself. As it happens.
You're serious, aren't you?
Yeah. This machine can have you back in time and back here again in, well, no time at all. So if you'd just like to take a seat over there, we can get started.
Okay, I'll give it a go.
That's the spirit. So, when and where is best for you to go back to so that you can get the answer you need?
I think it would have to be Hampshire in England. The assizes. July 1828.
No problemo. I'll pick a nice day for you. Not a Wednesday, you know what they're like. And before I forget, you'll need this temporal beacon.
What does that do?
Well, keep it safe, because that's your ticket back home. All you need to do is just press the big button on the top when you're ready, and you'll be back here in a flash.
Okay, I've got it.
Well, here we go. Gary Stanley, thank you, goodbye, and good luck. July 1828, Hampshire Assizes. Spot on. Oh, a little too spot on. He's in the judge's seat. Ooh. The Family Histories podcast was presented and produced by me, Andrew Martin, and my guest was the brilliant Gary Stanley. If you've enjoyed this episode, then why not share it with all your friends? Until next time, thank you so much for listening. Approximately no family historians were harmed in the making of this podcast.